because when you come across toxicity and you become a part of the story, because you have to be at the center. If you're writing about uh, employees who haven't been paid for 24 months, you have to understand the kind of problems that they're going through. They're not able to put food on the table, or students or their parents who are trapped in the in debt, right? So the amount of toxicity, because I remember a conversation where Byju actually said that your reporting is wrong, and if you do things like that, I will have to. If tomorrow I have to fire 20,000 people, will you be responsible for it? He asked me. So that kind of toxicity comes through to you. It's like secondhand smoking. The investors who have invested in the company, and the company has raised more than $5 billion, right? Which at today's conversion rate is about 40,000 crore, maybe more than that, right? So who is accountable for it? Who has to be held accountable for, right? So investors want their money. There are vendors who have not been paid. There are students whose life will suffer. Who has to be made accountable for this? There has to be accountability, right? We tend to put people on the pedestal, right? And founders often have this God complex. I hope and I pray that people understand that nobody is God, right?
This podcast is in association with the 10th edition of the Bangalore Business Literature Festival 2024. It is India's most attended and longest running business literature festival. The BizLit Fest celebrates and fosters the culture of reading, writing, and publishing business literature. Join us as we bring you heart-to-heart conversations with our esteemed authors and business leaders to inspire you with their insights and also maybe write your own book.
Hi, in today's episode, we have with us Pradip K, a well-known journalist and author, one of the co-founders of The Morning Context. In his career spanning 17 years, Saha has been part of several reputed newsrooms. He's best known for his comprehensive reporting on internet startups, the gig economy, socio-political issues, and the intersection of technology and human endeavor. Over the last few years, Saha has written extensively about education technology and its evolution in India. So I'm going to call you Pradeep instead of Saha. He made his debut as an author in 2023 with The Learning Trap: How Byju's Took Indian Edtech for a Ride, a best-selling book on the rise and fall of Byju's, one of India's largest education technology company that I think everybody in India knows about, based on his experiences covering Byju's for The Morning Context. So welcome to today's episode. And let's just talk a little bit about The Learning Trap: How Byju's Took Indian EdTech for a Ride. What initially sparked your interest in Byju's and the Indian EdTech industry?
Oops. First of all, thank you, Mohua, for this lovely chat. Thank you for inviting me to the show. As to your question of what interested me into writing about Byju's, I guess when we were figuring out back in the day, I think it was 2020, and we were early 2020. It was January 2020 or December 29, and December 19, when we decided to write about the education technology sector. Why? Because it was gathering traction. It was a time when a lot of venture capital was coming into the ecosystem, and things were on the rise. And as journalists, you always tend to figure out what is the next sector that you can write about, which is like coming up, and which people would be interested in. Two things actually made me interested in the sector. One, I was very much interested in education as a sector, as a beat, and second, obviously, it was a startup sector. A lot of money had come into the sector at that point in time, so we decided to write about the education technology sector as in general. Now, how do you write about education technology when, or any sector for that matter, when you begin with? Uh, you begin with the biggest company or the biggest trend. At that point, it was Byju's. It had the largest amount of capital raised by any startup in the sector. And then it was also largest in terms of people or students that were on its platform, right? So it was the largest company, so to say, and it was kind of a bellwether. So whatever Byju's did, others used to tend to follow. So obviously we started with Byju's, and as you know, happens with all the journalists, you do one story, and then it becomes a thread, right? One story gives lends to another story, and so on and so forth. That's how I started with writing about the company, and it just went on from there. So yeah, that would be the thing.
So, looking back at your experience while writing this book, what was the most challenging part of uncovering Byju's story?
Oh, multiple things. First of all, when you are talking about the biggest company in any sector, right? You need to you need to be very careful for multiple factors. One, there will be very difficult to find people to talk with, people who can give you information. I hate to call them sources because they are more than that, right? So I don't call them sources. These people who give us their information about the company, they could be employees, past employees, current employees, they could be uh, you know other people from the sector, or just people who have experience of the sector in general, just by watching it and following it for over the years. First of all, to figure out who these people are, because it's very difficult for me for making people trust you to begin with, to give you that kind of information. That was the difficult part first. Then as you go into uh, the sector, go into reporting, go into the stories, obviously there is a pushback from the leadership of the company, because obviously they understand that you are not doing the fawning stories about how much money you raised, or what good you have done for the ecosystem, because there are people who are doing that as well. But our job, we decided very early on with the morning context, is that we wanted to follow the money, and we wanted to follow the money and see whether the money has gone into the things that was promised, and whether it had made any impact in general. Uh, so these were the things that we had decided to do to begin with, and this is what we have been doing ever since 5 years almost. Uh, so when you do these stories, obviously you dig deeper than just fundraisers or plans or whatever the CEO is talking about. You try to get deeper and ask questions, which is why uh, founders and CEOs as well as venture capitalists don't take very kindly to journalists like me or platforms like the Morning Context. So it was very difficult because, and I have mentioned that in the book, right? Multiple conversations that I had with the founder Byju, the kind of conversations that we had, where the founder will just stonewall you to begin with. And the moment they understand that stonewalling isn't working, because the journalist will come out with his story, they will try to do all things, right? There's a phrase in Hindi, right? Sam dam dand bhed, right? So you do everything in your power to ensure that this story doesn't come out, and they have done that with several stories. So obviously reporting was difficult, and also these are people with influence, right? I i am just a journalist, right? I haven't raised millions of dollars or billions of dollars, and I don't have that kind of source approach and kind of reach uh, to the kind of people that he or the company has, right? So obviously these are the things that come with the job. So yeah, it was difficult, and obviously these are the operational parts, right? These are operational difficulties that you kind of face when you are reporting a story or trying to write about a company. But there are things that go beyond it, right? To reconcile with whatever is happening, because when you come across toxicity, and you become a part of the story, because you have to be at the center. If you're writing about uh, employees who haven't been paid for 24 months, you have to understand the kind of problems that they're going through. They're not able to put food on the table, or students or their parents who are trapped in the in debt, right? So the amount of toxicity, because I remember a conversation where Byju actually said that your reporting is wrong, and if you do things like that, I will have to, if tomorrow I have to fire 20,000 people, will you be responsible for it? He asked me. So that kind of toxicity comes through to you. It's like secondhand smoking. you know it comes to you, and at many times you question yourself, your job, the kind of stories that you do, because these have impact, right? uh, so it takes a mental toll on the reporter as well. I've seen that, I've felt that firsthand. So yeah, there were challenges.
So, Byju's had a meteoric rise, right? So, what do you
Yeah.
think were the key factors that contributed to its absolute initial success?
Uh, Multiple things again, right? You have to understand the time and age that Byju's actually was that successful. We are not talking about Byju's 1.0 at this point, right? Byju's 1.0 was the version where Byju Ravindran took offline classes in stadiums and, in the lobby of hotels and all those. That's behind us now. When we are talking about the meteoric rise of the company, we are talking about the period of about 2015 to 2019-20. That's the period we are talking about, right? Multiple things helped actually. 2015 was a period when a lot of money actually started coming into Indian consumer tech segment, right? So a lot of money came in. So obviously they were cash rich. They had the money to push growth, right? Also, they had a very unique approach. I mean, when the first ad came with Shah Rukh Khan saying, "Come fall in love with learning." I mean, I come from a generation where we didn't understand there's something called learning, right? We were told ki these are your syllabus books, read. If you have to do rote learning, do it. If you have to understand concepts, do it. Figure it out. Go write the exams, get the marks, and go to the next class. That's the generation that I come from. Uh, when I heard about learning, right, and at that point in time I was just a consumer of these ads. I was not a I wasn't going to buy Byju's, right? 2015. It did hit that some companies talking about learning, and when I actually started reporting on the company, it did come out as a very very interesting point of view. If you go back to a study that Harvard did, if I'm not mistaken, in 2016 or 2017, they spoke about this approach, right? Byju's point of falling in love with learning. I think no other company in the history of Indian education technology has focused on learning so much, emphasized on learning so much. So obviously their approach was unique. Uh, to fit their approach, they did two more things. One was their advertising, right? So they just went bonkers. They went like they left no stone unturned. They advertised everywhere that was possible. They had Shah Rukh Khan. They had the Indian cricket team on board, both men's and women's. They were like they partnered with FIFA so that they can reach out to global audience, right? And to be honest, this actually gave them a platform, right? They were household names. Like, I don't know if you will find, if let's give you numbers, right? So if you go out randomly and talk to 10 people on the road, I can guarantee that you will find 8 of them know about Byju's, right? So that is the kind of their reach. They had become a household name. They were on billboards, they were on television, they were in the newspapers, they were left, right, and center. So this is about branding and marketing, right? First of all was their approach about learning. Then there's the branding and marketing. Third and very important part is the product that they had built, right? If you go to the product, you will find that they had used multiple modes of uh, pedagogy, right? They had used animation, they had used videos, they had used jingles, music, everything, to make things more interesting. To teach projectile motion, for example, they play a cricket match, they show a shot of a batsman hitting a six, the ball in the motion, and then they teach projectile motion. Just these are examples, right? So the pedagogy was good. So the lessons were interesting. And the final thing, right, is the sales approach. No other company in the history of education technology, again, has had this kind of sales strategy. At one point in time, they had like tens of thousands of salespeople out in the market. And again, these people, they had targets and they did everything, to convert a lead into a sale. uh, Lead is somebody who just happens to be on the Byju app, or just takes one quiz or something, and to convert them into paying subscribers, right? They did everything possible, and Byju's sales machinery in itself is a story. So they had these things working for them. They had the capital, they had the messaging, they had a unique approach, they had the sales strategy. And obviously they had a good product at that point in time. The product, the pedagogy is was good, at least unique. Why it failed is a different matter.
So Byju's wasn't just an edtech company; it became like a household name. So how did the company really manage to build such a powerful brand identity that everybody actually wanted to go in and join Byju's?
So again, multiple things that I just said, right? So their branding was powerful, their communications were powerful, their advertising was very powerful. They were throwing in bunch of money. They spent thousands of crores on advertising itself, right? If you look at their numbers in 2021, FY 2020, 2021, you will see that they had spent like thousands of crores, almost as much as they earned in revenue in just media and advertising, branding and marketing, right? So that was a different matter. The second thing is, right, the sales strategy. It was very, very unique, right? So, for example, the lead generation team, which will get, you know, as a parent or as a customer, if suppose I go on the Byju app, or I see an ad on Byju's and I just happen to click over there, right? So it will, the company will get to know that Pradeep Saha has, clicked on this ad, and they will get my number and they will start messaging me, calling me, and whatever, whatever, whatever. Then this team will give the sales team my number and my address to go and do a home visit. Byju's were most successful when it used to do home visits, right? So the sales team would go do home visits, and these home visits could last anywhere between, like, say, 20 minutes to 3 hours, and they will do everything to persuade the parent to buy this product for their children. uh, Easiest way persuasion, like, they will begin with something like, your child is so genius, he has scored a scholarship. These are things they will say over the calls as well. We are giving him 50% scholarship, this will help him do great, and blah blah blah, everything. uh, if suppose you're still not convinced, they will say, okay, let's understand what the child where the child is, to understand the base, right? And they will show you a clip. There's a very famous question, and you'll find it on YouTube. Baju Ravindran telling how many points are there in a circle. It's a geometry problem, very interesting way of teaching students geometry, and very, very engaging as well, right? So salesperson will ask the student some questions, then they will, if they answer it right, they will move on to the next question. If suppose they answer it wrong, they will show the app, they will show the video, they will make them understand, and then they will say, okay, now do you understand? Now let's go on to this question. Do you understand? So, convincing that this app is actually good, and then they will play the bargain with the parent, right? So they will first try to persuade them, showing key, see how much difference this one thing has made, and it would be great if you did this, and we will give you this much discount, and we will do this, we will give you a private mentor, we will give you a tutor, we'll give you XYZ services, we will check back on the student month by month. All these things would be promised. Then the parent will say, okay, I don't have funds. Okay, don't you worry, sir, I will give you financing as well. I have tie up with these companies, and I will get you financing as well. So everything was taken care of, and the sales team was instructed that they cannot come back without making the sale. They also had a monthly target to cover, so obviously it was in their interest to convert these sales. So these sales tactics was very, very useful in getting the students on board. You have to also understand that this is this is like when there is no pandemic, right? The pandemic only made matters worse for education, and it acted as rocket fuel for online businesses. And when I say online businesses, it's not just education technology, it is every online business. If you remember, Zoom, nobody knows about Zoom today, right? But Zoom became a thing during the pandemic. All these internet businesses became a thing, and education technology became a big thing because education moved online, because all the schools, colleges, all the institutions were closed. There was no other way of learning or getting education. So all these platforms, including Byju's, were a huge hit at that point in time. And obviously, being the biggest in the market, and all these companies around March, April 2020, they opened up their platform for free for all the incoming students, because obviously they saw a market. The idea at that point in time was like, this top of the funnel or all these people, let them use, and then we will show, and then we'll probably convert them into subscribers. So all these things put together made it obviously the largest company, largest edtech company in the in the country. Not just the largest edtech company, but I think it was the largest startup at one point in time, right? So it was valued at 22 billion uh, back in October 2022, which was higher than the valuation of Paytm, which was before that, which was the biggest startup at $17 billion. So all these things helped Byju's in reaching where it did.
So, what are the most shocking practices that you uncovered while you were writing your book?
Uh, the most shocking actually were two. Yeah, the way the sales machine worked, right? And there are multiple aspects of this sales tactic, right? Uh, right from how they fulfilled targets and how managers treated their subordinates, right? And there are multiple videos available now on online. Uh, they did everything, and this is number one. And number two is how they got parents trapped into the entire loan thing, right? So I'll explain this to you. First of all, this when I talk about the sales practices, right? mm, just to make a sale, they will do everything, right? So there are teams, there are different teams in the sales department, right? So let's suppose, and there used to be a weekly roster, how which person has made how much sales and how far behind they are from the target, and what will have to be done. uh, and the communication on these WhatsApp groups were like absolutely horrendous, right? I've written about it again, and it was shocking for me to discover that kind of language being used by the superiors to their subordinates. Anyway, obviously, there were a lot of cuss words, there were a lot of shouting back and forth. uh, but they would, to make a sale, they would actually pay money from their pockets, right? So if suppose they're talking to a customer, and the customer is saying, ki boss, I don't have the money for down payment, and they will say, ki sir, aisa hai ki I will do the 5,000 down payment for you. You please pay me whenever you can, and you pay the rest of the fee, or I will put you on EMI. You don't even have to worry about all these things. So they will put money from their pocket. Sometimes what used to happen was, let's say there would be X number of people who would make the down payment, but in subsequent months they would fail to pay the EMIs, right? So that money comes to the company, but it doesn't get utilized, right? uh, or maybe they haven't even bought the product, right? They haven't even got the product, but they have made the down payment. That down payment, that money stays with the company. So now what the salesperson does is, when he has to make the next sale, he will use the money that he got from the previous sale, from the customer who did not buy it, to pay for the next customer, you know and the last customer who didn't get the product probably wouldn't even notice, right? I have had salespeople telling me that these practices happened a lot. So this entire sales machinery, I mean, the way it functioned, it is absolutely, it's mind blowing, at some extent, because you can't actually uh, understand the how big it was, or how
It sounds
it
so
was.
unethical, Pradeep.
It is unethical. It is, to say it's unethical is an understatement. Uh, I don't want to cause a libel here, so I wouldn't go into more details, but you can figure it out yourself. The kind of practices there were. The second thing that was actually shocking, and this was when parents called us, right? And parents told us that they haven't even got the product, or they had asked for cancellation, and or they were not using it, and they had stopped paying EMIs. And they had told the company to close their loans, right? But the company hadn't closed their loans, and they were getting calls from banks saying that you have to pay your EMI. And these parents actually told me that eventually the salespeople, they obviously, somebody calls from the bank and tells the parent that, boss, you haven't paid the EMI, please pay. And as a parent, I'm shocked because I'm not even using the product. I've asked for a cancellation. I have nothing to do with this. In some cases, I've even, sent back the device. So why am I getting the calls? So my first reaction would be to call the salesperson. And in multiple cases, the salespeople told these parents to close the particular bank account from which EMI was taken. Right? Now imagine the kind of credit, the kind of loss they will make on their credit history, right? Credit worthiness, right? That's one part of the problem. Second part, and the bigger part of the problem, was multiple times these people told the parents that you can make a down payment and the rest of it you can pay the company every month, right? There were no communications made to the parents that they are actually signing up for a loan from a third party, in which case it will happen that Byju's is A. Byju has given the product to the customer, which is B. In turn, B is signing an agreement with Byju and a third party lender, which is C. The lender is giving money to Byju's directly on behalf of the customer, and the parent has to pay EMIs to the third party lender. Parents are under the assumption that the company Byju's has given me the tablet. I will pay Byju's. Parents don't even know that there's a bank or a credit agency or a lender in picture. So these were like I was quite shocked when I discovered these two things, to be honest, right? And obviously there are other things about like the uh, founders saying something and doing completely opposite, lying through their teeth most of the times. If lying is too strong a word, at least not telling the truth entirely, I would say. Right. So these are very shocking practices to discover, as I did.
I'm quite short of words, actually, Pradeep.
I was too. I was too. I have lived through this. So yeah.
So, there a lot of people were very skeptical when the Byju's valuation was peaked at $22 billion. So, do you think at any point they were justified?
Valuation is, see, valuation is a vanity metric. The entire ecosystem is going to kill me for this. They will hate me for life for saying this. But you know, most sane people would say that valuation is a vanity metric, right? Valuation is nothing but just agreement between two people that I'm valued at this. It can happen over anything, right? So there's a funny thing that somebody actually told me that valuation could be two people could be sitting, and I mean, you go to Bangalore and you will see. I mean, you're from Bangalore, right?
Yeah.
And I have been to Bangalore, and all my meetings happened in third wave coffee, right? And you will see that founders are talking to investors at third wave, right? So imagine, so all the conversations in Bangalore over drinks or coffee are about some founder trying to do something or pitching their idea to something to raise some funds, right? So this person was telling me, almost joking, but it kind of hit the mark, right? That suppose two people are sitting at a bar drinking, right? And they happen to chance upon an idea. And then one person is telling the other person, and valuation is something, they can write down the idea on the back of a tissue paper, and one person can agree to a valuation of the second person, right? And they will go with that. So valuation is not an actual number. I'll tell you exactly how it works, right? Suppose I start a company, and I come to you saying, Mohua, that I'm doing this company, but I'm falling short of capital. This is the idea. This is what I want to do. Would you be interested in becoming a partner? And you'll say, what a wonderful idea. What I will do is I'll pay 100 rupees for, let's say, 1%, right? So 100 rupees at 1% gives me what? The valuation of 10,000 rupees, right? 100 into 100 is 10,000 rupees. So my company is valued at 10,000. Tomorrow I will go to a third person saying, so from being valued at nothing, my company just got the valuation of 10,000 because you gave me 100 rupees, right? Now I'll go to somebody else and I will say, boss, my company is valued at 10,000 rupees. I am doing this, and this. And I will show them that I can change the world, right? and I can do this and that. And he will say, what a lovely idea. Let's talk valuation. And I'll say, this is my valuation. Now I want to raise at a higher valuation. So he will say, okay, what is your ask? I will say that, I my next ask would be 20,000, right? And that person will agree, because now I have something to show. I have one fundraise to show him, right? So he will buy a stake at 20,000, and just like that my valuation is 20,000 rupees, and it keeps growing from there. uh, Once you have taken money, right, from one investor, it is also in the interest, because for example, understand this, Mohua, you have invested 100 rupees in me at a valuation of 10,000 rupees. Tomorrow somebody has come, and my valuation is now 20,000 rupees, which means your money has just doubled, right? Now it is in your interest also to find more investors which can invest in at a higher valuation, because your money will get doubled, tripled, and so on and so forth. And the new investor who has come will do the same for me, right? So I now have two people who will vouch for me, who will do things for me, because their own money is stuck. And this is how valuation changes with every subsequent round of funding. And this is one reason why bubbles get created and then get busted. And when they actually do go bust, a lot of people take a hit. Like, take for example Byju's, right? Byju's valuation was what, $22 billion dollars at its peak. At the last rights issue, which the company had proposed, I have no idea whether it has been successful or not, but their valuation has fallen down to 25 million from 22 billion. Do the math, right? So, this is not the only company. I'm sure you have heard about Oyo.
Yeah, of course.
Oyo's peak valuation was around 10 billion at one point in time. And recently, the founder Ritesh Agarwal has paid 150 million dollar, and its valuation is now 2.5 or 2.7 billion dollars. It's like 25% of what it was, right? And that too, to sustain that kind of valuation, the founder himself had to put money. He got no other investor. Same thing happened with a company called WeWork. I'm sure you guys
Yeah,
know
yeah,
about WeWork, founded by
absolutely.
Adam Newman in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, yeah.
Masayoshi Son of SoftBank gave him huge rounds of funding, and then they took huge haircut. Like, I'm talking about billions of dollars. So that man lost billions of dollars just because of this valuation game. So this is the reason I say valuation is uh, a vanity metric. Generally, what you do is, I apologize for being too technical over here and too numbers oriented, but I'll just try to give you one example, right? How valuations are looked at is basically what the company's income is or revenue is, right? How much does a company earn from its operations over 1 year? So whatever I have done that, whatever I have earned in the last year would be my revenue, right? Now, my valuation would be a projection on this number. Let's say I have to give a projection, a valuation on this. So I will tell you that, Mohammed, see, I have done 100 rupees revenue this year. This, as we talk right now, this year I am looking to do about 200 rupees in revenue. So my valuation should be a multiple of 200 rupees, right? Now you have to understand that there is no proof to show that I am actually doing business of 200. My last valuation, my last revenue is only 100. So I am already at 2x. So my revenue calculation might already be inflated. And then I will ask you a multiple on this, right? Healthy businesses get a multiple of about 3, 5, 7, right? So I will say my valuation would be like, 1,200, 1,400. Uh, the Byju's revenue in the last financial year that for which they have filed was about 5,000 crore, and 5,000 crore was the group consolidated revenue, right? 5,000 crore would be around what? Around 600 million, right? So consider the multiple there, the valuation of 22 billion on a business of, $500 million. So it was just not sustainable. It was just not sustainable. And I think many of the internet businesses are built on this metric called valuation, which are just not sustainable. But it was possible because obviously there was too much money in the market,
Yeah.
and online businesses were the only option. So yeah.
So the COVID-19 pandemic was a major turning point for Byju's, right? So
Yes.
can you talk about how the pandemic really influenced the company's trajectory? And I mean, obviously, because people were sitting at home and everybody was worried about their children, all of those things did, want parents and students to get, their admissions going. What were the other things that you feel, Pradeep, were, part of the growth trajectory?
See, it actually provided it was rocket fuel for all these companies, right? Two things happened when the pandemic struck. First of all, there was a global lockdown, right? So all the
Yeah.
offline businesses, actually, we were saying that offline businesses will die, you know,
Yes.
and many of them actually died. Online was the only option. So where would you
Yes.
go? The online valuation of the online businesses will grow, right? Uh, Plus, mm, they just opened up their platform. They opened up their platform saying, all of you come to me free of cost, and they took on millions and millions of students. So that was a kind of growth. Third was easy money, easy capital, easy liquidity in the markets, right? So when COVID happened, I'll take you one step back. So all the rates or liquidity in the market, capital markets, are decided by the policy rates of the Federal Reserve, that is the central bank of the United States of America. So the Federal Reserve fixes the rates and according to which money markets move. This before this COVID pandemic, this happened during the global meltdown years, right? 2008 to 12 onwards, right? There was something called qualitative easing, QE. When what the bank did was they pumped in a lot of money in the market because obviously there were no jobs in the market, right? So people didn't have the money. So consumption was down. So the world economy was going down. So the bank pumped a lot of money in the market, and they pushed the rate down to almost zero, which and when the interest rates are at zero, why would anybody keep their money with the federal bank, right? They will obviously invest in companies from where they can actually get some income back, right? Which is why when the rates go down near zero, a lot of money comes in the market and it goes into businesses which are growing. And during pandemic, the only businesses that were growing were online businesses,
Absolutely.
right? And online businesses were growing one, and obviously the sector that grew among the best was education technology. And it's not just about India. We talk about India, but education technology across the world gained momentum at that point in time. A lot of money came to India. The other big reason, obviously, this pandemic and Federal Reserve's near zero rate was one big reason. The second big reason was lockdown. The third big reason that not many people talk about is the crackdown in China. The Chinese government took major initiative, I think, in the middle of 2021, where they came down heavily on all internet businesses. One of the worst hit were its education technology companies. Basically, what the Chinese government did was, in a matter of a day or 2 days, they said that any company that is involved in teaching school subjects or syllabus or curriculum to students cannot raise money, cannot raise capital, cannot go list outside China. So basically, they ensured that none of these companies can become for-profit companies. You know, so they again, a lot of money till then was actually going to China. But China closed its door overnight. It basically decimated their education technology sector, but it also made sure that the money that was actually meant for China came to India. And where will you go in India? Let's say, in any way, India had, like, let's say, 10 businesses or 15 businesses that were doing all right, right, in education technology. Now, if you are taking a bet in a race where there are 10 horses, who will you bet your money on, right? You would like to bet your money on the horse who's most likely to win the race, right? Who is the fastest, who's growing the fastest, who is the biggest. All of these things were Byju's. Byju's was the biggest company. Byju's was backed by marquee investors, the best in the best, the creme de la creme of VC world, uh, and it was buying competition. Byju at that point, uh, they bought Whitehead Junior. They bought Topper. Topper was a competitor brand, right? They bought Akash. They bought around eight. I think during the pandemic or around the pandemic, they actually did about 12 acquisitions, if I'm not mistaken, uh, which is quite a lot, right?
12
Uh,
acquisitions.
yes. And so, where is the option of anybody going elsewhere? There's no competition in the market. If you look at the market today, the only competition is Vedantu, you know, and Vedantu is not doing very well themselves, right? Itself. So that's the thing, right? Investors were queuing up to invest in Byju's because this very reason, right? And obviously, like if you are a small investor, right? Where do you want to invest? If you want to buy a house somewhere anywhere, right? You will ask your friends, your family, where they have invested. You have to do your own due diligence, but you would believe that when your friends or people who you trust on, they have done their own due diligence, then it will be safe to invest there, right? Exactly the same thing happened with Byju's. When all these marquee companies, including Sequoia, General Atlantic and Process and all these venture capitalists, they have invested in Byju's, then small investors would say that that means it's a safe company because everybody else has taken a bet on this, and that is the best bet, right? You can't bet on the number 3 or number 4th player, knowing that number 1 can actually acquire number 4 any given day, right? So a lot of money went into Byju's. Because of the money, Byju's could actually go all out to do everything that it could, right? So it acquired companies, it doubled down on growth, and everything happened. And exactly, that's what happened, right? So it had the money, there was a global lockdown, online businesses were the only thing, and that's how it grew. And it, like, yeah.
So, Pradeep, there's a recurring theme in your book of the disconnect between Baiju's promises and the actual learning outcomes, right? So, let's just talk a little bit about the broader edtech landscape. How did Baiju's rise and fall affect other players in the industry? Like you said, that all of them were bought, they were acquired by them, and there
Hmm.
weren't any, left afterwards. So, what do you think also were, the key lessons that other edtech startups can learn, from the Baiju story?
See, one question that we started raising in our reporting in very early years of our reporting was the question about learning outcomes. What do you mean by learning outcomes? Let's say I teach you something and it helps you in doing something. That's like learning outcome. Like, for example, if I teach you for a test tomorrow, and if you pass the test tomorrow, then there is an outcome of the learning that you made from me, right? Unfortunately, in case of Byju's, there was no learning outcomes, and nobody was questioning these learning outcomes back in the day. Now everybody has. Every investor today asks for learning outcomes or how the company measures learning outcomes, right? And why are there no learning outcomes, right? Because education in itself is a long haul game. It's not about like 1 day, 2 day, 5 day. The school education, kindergarten to 12, which is called K-12 segment, right? It's an engagement of about 15, 16 years. You stay in a school for 15, 16 years, and education happens or outcomes happen over a period of time. It happens over a decade, not over a month or a year. So it's very difficult for a company to define outcomes, and Byju could never define its outcomes, right? Next, if I say that, if Byju's were to say that, X student did better in this exam, how is the company going to prove whether it was just because of their tablet or their education system? There are X number of factors. There could be the faculty, the teacher at the school, which might have changed. There could be other peer interactions. There could be better, the student might have gotten better, right? So there are so many variables in this equation that it's very difficult to ascertain learning outcomes because of one reason or the second, right? So that's one thing. Everybody has started asking for education outcomes, and the only businesses that are doing well are those which has proven educational or learning outcomes to show. Uh, Number two, because of this entire debacle, obviously Byju's has decimated a lot of competition, but it also has uh, got investors wary, right? If you look at the trend over the last couple of years, you will see that venture capital investment into uh, tech startups, internet startups, has gone down significantly. And it is not just about one company or two companies, it's across the sector, across education technology, and across larger tech investment, tech sector, right? Tech startup sector. Uh, so, yes, investors have got cautious. There is a paucity of funds or capital for companies. And if you look at the landscape after the problems with Byju's, you will see that there aren't many companies left in the segment that they were in. So the downfall of Byju's has put a question mark over education technology, at least in the K-12 segment, right? It's not just about them also. It's not just about the companies too, because you look at the large workforce that Byju had, right? At its peak, it has more than 58,000 employees. Uh, the employees that have left, and there are about 45,000 people who have been fired or who have left the company over the last 2 years. These people are finding it difficult to get a job because other companies are not employing people with Byju's in their resume for multiple reasons. One reason is obviously they have to make them unlearn all the tactics and then make them learn again the practices that they deem fair. That's number one. Number two, because Byju's at a point when it was doing well, it actually hired people at a much larger pay scale, which other companies could not. So obviously, these people are finding it very, very difficult. So Byju's downfall, as we have seen so far, has caused multiple ripple effects. It's created a ripple effect in terms of investors' confidence. They are not as confident about investing in Indian education technology space as at this point, at least in the K-12 segment. It has also obviously taken a lot of uh, a lot of people working for them are at a very, very bad state right now. It has also eroded confidence of the parents on education technology platforms, right? Because you and I and everybody else are able to see what's happening with the company and how the messaging is coming through. There are reports every day. So it has kind of had ripple effects in multiple ways.
Really sad. So if you could advise the Indian government in on regulating the edtech industry, what would be your top recommendations, Pradeep?
I don't know if full-fledged regulation is needed because also, see, there are two schools of thought. I would uh, ideally like the government to have some kind of a say or some way to regulate these education technology platforms, but you know once regulation comes, the innovations will also, and this is what entrepreneurs have told me, and they will say that they don't want regulations with, because when regulations come there will be less room for innovation. But where does one draw the line, right? uh, I'll give you why I'm saying this. Byju's, in his own words, has more than 150 million students on its platform. Uh, there would be about 3 to 5 million paid students, right? Uh, which is a lot, right?
Huge.
And every student would have paid anywhere between 25,000 to 2 lakh rupees to that company. If the company were to go down, where do these people go? Where do they get that money from? The investors who have invested in the company, and the company has raised more than $5 billion, right? Which at today's conversion rate is about 40,000 crore, maybe more than that, right? So who is accountable for it? Who has to be held accountable for it? Right? So investors want their money. There are vendors who have not been paid. There are students whose life will suffer. Who has to be made accountable for this? There has to be accountability, right? So I would want the government to have some sort of policy in place that can actually uh, make people accountable for the things that they do. Yeah.
So, Pradeep, what do you think the readers would take away from the learning trap?
I hope and I pray the first lesson, uh, as somebody told me, that, we tend to we tend to put people on the pedestal, right? And founders often have this God complex. I hope and I pray that people understand that nobody is God, right? They don't put people on pedestal. Uh, that's one takeaway, right? We tend to hero worship people, right? Be it scientists or entrepreneurs or everyone, right? That's one thing. The second thing is I wanted to talk about this FOMO, right? Education. Education is a lot more than just education for a lot of people in India, right? A large number of our population lives below the poverty line, or
Yes.
they are just able to make ends meet, right? And for all of those people, education becomes this key to a better future, right? A ladder into a more comfortable future tomorrow. So there's a lot of pressure on parents to ensure that they do everything possible for their children so that they can come out of this life of poverty. Or and for that reason, they tend to believe in companies or products which are not up to the mark, right? This fear that and this is a big fear that Byju used to kind of prey on, right? So that you know this is the education. If you get your children educated, they can do this and this, and they can earn salaries in crores, right? Remember White Hat Junior's ad, that one particular Gupta, who's 10 years old or 12 years old and earning a salary of 150 crore at Google, right? Those kind of statements. I'm not sure if that is the exact statement that they made, but similar statements, right? So you look at all the college placements, and you see the headlines dominating, saying that student get a package of these many crore or these $1 million, right? So education is a lot more than just education in India, and companies tend to use this as a hook to get parents who don't know better, right? Uh, and a lot of parents don't, who are not educated enough or who are not aware enough, who don't have internet like you and me, right? Who are not, who can't read the stories that go out there. I want them to understand. I want this message to go out to them. I don't know how it will reach them, but probably through word of mouth. Uh, but to ask questions, right? Don't fall for the FOMO. I've seen a lot of parents in urban India who understand all these things also fall prey for this. I want them to ask questions, right? Ask questions, check, do your own research. There are much better. Internet and YouTube is it has a wealth of knowledge. If you just go there and if you want to study and learn, there are X number of ways to learn, right? You don't have to just fall prey for these companies and pay them exorbitant amounts to do, to study or to learn things. So these are the two things that I would think people take away from this book. One is this hero worshipping should stop, and parents who fall for this FOMO. I think children learn, right? Over a period of time, children learn, and everybody kind of gets to where they eventually get to, right? In our day and age, there was no Byju's, right? So we did all right, I believe. So, that is number two. And number three, general, just the public awareness, right? It's so poor in India, right? Uh, People just believe in every kind of thing that they see online. So yeah, I mean that's that. It's a story. Byju's is not just a story of a company, right? Uh, it's obviously it's about a business of a company, but it is much more than that. It's about our society and uh, how it impacts us. The story of Byju does not only talk about Byju the company, but it talks about the 150 million students that they say they are on that platform and thousands of employees that they have had. So it impacts us all. I hope people take that lesson. Yeah.
Thank you, Pradeep, for being on today's podcast.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mohua. It was lovely chatting with you. Thank you for inviting me, and to all the listeners and viewers. Catch me on 14th of September during the 10th edition of the Bangalore Biz Lit Fest at Catholic Club in Bangalore.
Thank you.
Catch the amazing business leaders and authors who will be speaking at the Bangalore Biz Lit Fest 2024 at the Catholic Club on 14th September. You can register by 10 a.m. to be part of the specially curated Bangalore Biz Lit Fest 2024.